Most indoor composters don't actually compost. They're just glorified food dehydrators and grinders. And while they produce something that looks like compost because it's been ground up and it's kind of brown, it's a little bit broken down, but it's not actually compost because it's actually lacking a lot of the microbes that come in and actually do the breaking down of the food material. So Reencle claims to be different from all those other ones. They actually include a biological inoculant to keep a culture in the composter at all times. And so today I'm going to be doing a deep dive on the Reencle composter, and I'm going to be testing their claim as to whether or not this is actually producing compost for the garden, or maybe it's just another fancier food dehydrator grinder. Hi, my name is Rachel, and before we get into all of that, I need to let you know that I did receive this unit for free from Reencle for testing. However, as part of our agreement, I did not agree to give it a positive review per se, and so today I am going to be actually sharing my honest opinions and making sure that you guys have all the information you need to make a decision on whether or not this is something that you actually are going to want to buy. So before we can actually decide whether or not this thing is producing compost, we have to start with what compost actually is. So by definition, compost is organic matter that has been decomposed by a variety of organisms, including things like bacteria, yeast, fungi, and then your macro decomposing organisms like pill bugs or cockroaches, things like that. And so if you were not actually decomposing that organic matter, you would not A, be releasing the nutrients in that organic matter, and B, you would find that that organic matter would just kind of create a layer that would pile up on itself and kind of never go away. And a fun side fact about this is before fungi evolved to decompose wood, there was actually no organism that decomposed that woody cellulose, and so it did actually pile up like that. And this layer is what eventually became the coal that we have mined today. So already we're seeing a difference between Reencle and other composters because other composters often don't include any microbes to help break down your organic matter. Some of them do to a certain extent, and they often are batch by batch basis. So you will add a little bit of whatever bacterial inoculant they have for that batch, and then you will take it all out and add another inoculant for the next batch. The thing with Reencle is it's actually maintaining a consistent bacterial colony inside the unit. Part of the instructions state that you should always leave a certain amount of your broken down compost in here to continue to nurture that bacterial culture. And you'll be adding it on top of that. It'll be mixing in the bacteria proliferate and grow, and then you take some of it out and add more food essentially for the bacteria, and then they again can grow and proliferate. And so you're just making more and more of this compost with the exact same inoculant. So you're only going to have to buy that once unless you manage to kill it, which seems to be pretty darn difficult, but we'll get into that in a minute. So the way that this actually works in practice is when you get your unit and you unbox it, you're gonna get it set up and you're gonna have to add your first bacterial culture to the unit to get it started. And that comes with the unit. It's actually a sizable amount of a bacterial culture. And then you're gonna have to add some water and wait a couple of days for the bacteria to actually wake up. They're gonna kind of come out of this dormancy that they were in from being dry and get up and awake and eating and settled and things like that. And so that's going to start happening over like about 24 to 48 hours once you've got this all started. After you've gotten your bacterial culture awake and ready to eat, you can start feeding it. And one of the great things about this composter is that you can actually feed it anything within reason. You cannot feed it things like bones and pits of things like stone fruits, just because they're going to get caught in the mechanism. But you can put things in here that you cannot put in other indoor composters. You can put your meat, you can put your moldy cheese, you can put your leftovers with oil in them. It's because of the bacterial culture in here that you can actually do that. And trust me, I tested this. I pushed it to its limits. I had at least half a pack of bacon in my fridge that I forgot about at the back, and it started to go real bad. So I just dumped the whole thing in here, and within 24 hours, it was practically gone. And there was actually no smell, no nothing. I was actually really shocked. I was expecting that to make it fail. And it did not fail. It did exactly what it said it would. And that bacterial culture in there actually started eating up all of the meat and also heating up and outcompeting all of the dangerous microbes that came in on that starting to go bad meat. And so that brings me to a very important point and something to consider when you're thinking about whether or not something is or is not compost. So there are two main stages to composting. There is thermophilic and mesophilic. And so thermophilic is the part of the composting process where bacteria really come in and do a lot of the initial breaking down. It gets really, really hot such that other microbes that are not the ones that are doing the composting actually die out. And so that is why composting can be so effective at killing weed seeds and also killing off mold and things like that. And then after you've gotten through the thermophilic process, you move on to the mesophilic. And so this is where all the stuff that the hot making bacteria can eat kind of goes away. And so they die off because they don't have anything to eat or they go somewhere else. And the compost starts to cool off. And once it's cool enough for other microbes to move in, you'll start seeing things like fungi, you're going to start seeing things like nematodes, and these are going to take the second step of the breakdown process and then start actually making this into a compost that you can then go ahead and apply to your plants. So to figure out just how far into the composting process this unit actually gets us, I sent off samples of it to soil analyst Matt Wakeman. You might have actually seen me mention him in one of my previous videos where we tested all the different areas of my garden and looked at what microbes are there, what might be missing, and Matt actually gave me really, really good feedback on things that I can do to improve the health of my soil. He can also do that for you. The link to hire him to analyze your soil is going to be in the description. So after using this composter for, I would say about 3 weeks, after throwing everything that I could into it, including that gone bad bacon, including moldy cheese, including all the leftovers that ever went bad in my fridge, and of course a lot of normal stuff too that would go into compost. I took some samples, I sent them off to Matt, and what Matt found was that there's actually a really high amount of bacteria and yeast in here. And bacteria and yeast are two things that are really well known to work together to break things down. You might recognize this pairing from fermentation, specifically things like kombucha, creating a SCOBY, which is a symbiotic colony of bacteria and yeast. That's what SCOBY stands for. And so that actually matches up pretty well with what it actually smells like when I open this. There is always a faint hint of that like fermenty smell to it. What Matt also found is that it was pretty warm when it arrived, and warmer than it would be just kind of sitting at room temperature. It was actually like warm to the touch, and that's probably an indication that it is self-heating because it is in the thermophilic phase of composting. Some things that Matt did not find in our sample include fungi, protozoa, or nematodes. And this indicates that this has not yet entered the mesophilic phase of composting. It's only in the thermophilic phase. And that makes sense, right? It would be really hard to have hot compost and cooler compost with two very separate microbial populations in one unit. And so Matt's recommendation and Reencle's official recommendation is that after you're done with the hot composting, with the thermophilic phase in this unit, you take your pre-compost outside and then allow it to go through the mesophilic phase with all of the microorganisms that exist outside. So either put it in a pile in contact with the ground or in a bottomless container, again, where it can get contact with the ground, where the microbes can come to it and do their thing. It's recommended that you let this process play out for about a month before you try and put the compost on your plants. If you were to take what is in here and then go put it directly on your plants, you might find that they don't really like that. This is, again, hot composting, thermophilic composting, and so the temperature in here is actually going to be getting regularly above 160 degrees Fahrenheit. And that is why, again, I can put in my rotting meat and it doesn't actually cause a problem, because all of those bad microbes are being killed off by the very high heat. So definitely do not put the hot compost on your plants, and just follow the recommendation of letting it sit and actually go through that mesophilic phase that is going to not only help it cool off, but also unlock a lot more of the nutrients from this compost. Because right now, this is pretty alkaline, and as it goes through the mesophilic phase, it is going to, as it's cooling off, also start to neutralize in its pH. All right, so now that we know what compost is and what this is actually doing in terms of the overall composting cycle, let's break down some of the other pros and cons of this specific brand and unit of composters. So first of all, it is actually doing the hot composting, which I have not seen in any other units of this type. And that does mean that as opposed to those other units, you can, as I've said repeatedly, you can put your rotting old meat in it and your moldy cheese and whatever else you want to, as long as it's not like a hard bone or a pit that is going to get caught up in the stirring mechanism of this. This is also super easy to use. It has a motion activated lid and it sits on the ground like a trash can. So you just like wave your foot in front of it and it opens and you dump your stuff in. And I found that to be extremely convenient, especially compared to some of the other stuff I've tested where there is a big sealed top that you have to remove. And sometimes that even takes two hands. So you have to set everything down, open it, dump your stuff in, use two hands to close it back. If you're strong, maybe you can use one hand, but still, the motion activated lid opening, closing, excellent. Another feature that this unit has is it actually has a removable first pass filter. So before things get into the big charcoal filter in the back, there is a smaller filter that prevents a lot of dust and debris from getting into your bigger filter. And this is removable and really easily washable. And having this extra step of filtering actually elongates the life of your bigger charcoal filter. This unit also uses very little power. And part of why it can do that is because the bacteria are what is creating the heat. It's not actually drawing power to heat up your compost. So all it really needs power to do is kind of circulate a little bit of air so that there's oxygen for this aerobic process, and also just turn its little arm to continue stirring and mixing everything as it's breaking down. Now, on the cons side, we do have the fact that this needs maintenance. If you only cook once a week and you would only have scraps to add to it once a week, then you are going to have to do intermittent maintenance in between adding scraps to make sure that the bacterial culture doesn't die. Because this is a living thing inside here. And so it's going to need something to eat. It's going to need moisture. The thing that I found is every day or every couple of days, I actually need to add more water to the unit because it tends to get really dry pretty quick because it is heating up so hot. It is evaporating a lot of that moisture. And if you allow it to get too dry, the bacteria will die. Now, the bacteria specifically in here, they are hardy, they are forgiving. If you forget a couple of times, you're not going to fully kill them, but in general, you should not be letting it dry out really regularly. And so you do have to kind of keep track of that, even when you're not adding to it specifically. You are also supposed to add kind of incrementally and not do like one big dump all at once. You're supposed to kind of spread it out so that you're consistently feeding the bacteria. So something that I have done in the past is I have had a secondary collection container of compost on my counter, and then I take that secondary container and dump the whole thing at once into a larger composting system. And that is not going to work with this. You actually do need to add kind of consistently. And so if you were to collect a bunch of scraps all at once, then you would maybe need to add it over like morning, evening, or even over a couple of days, depending on just how much volume of scraps you have to add. So again, sort of a con is that it is a living thing and it does need to be cared for almost like a pet. Another tick in the cons column is that this is a pretty expensive model. It's going to be more expensive than some of the other indoor composters that you can find on the market. And to me, that makes sense. It is very high quality, and of course it comes with this bacterial culture that you do only need to buy once. Although if you were to kill your bacterial culture by accident, they do offer, extras that you can buy. But theoretically, if you take good care of it, it should live indefinitely. And so because of all this stuff, it is pretty expensive, and that price tag might just price you out of it, which is very unfortunate. Also in the cons column, again, this is not producing a finished compost product. It is halfway done and it will need finishing outside. I don't think you can actually find an indoor unit that will do both the thermophilic and the mesophilic phase for you. And if you could, it would be even more expensive than this one. And so the fact that it's not fully finished compost, I think, is kind of a con, although of course it is a pro that it is thermophilic at all compared to some of the other units. So a final con to this unit is that it does require essentially a balanced diet. You cannot exclusively feed it raw meat and expect the bacteria to thrive. You definitely have to feed it kind of a balance of everything, and of course you can absolutely feed it the meats, the cheeses, the oils, anything like that, but it has to be in balance with all the other types of food scraps that you're generating, including vegetable scraps and maybe leftover fruit cuttings and your coffee grounds, and then also some of your browns like your paper towels and things like that. Definitely has to be balanced. And so while I wouldn't say you have to keep super close track, you definitely just have to keep in mind that it has to be a variety and you cannot just solely add in one thing and expect the bacteria to thrive. All right, so let's talk about my final recommendations given all of that information. For me, I actually absolutely love this thing. I can see myself using this consistently for many years to become, if I'm being totally honest. And I actually, so when I review products like this, I'm often offered an affiliate code, and I usually don't like to include it because I don't want you guys to look at that and say, oh, well, she's just saying good things about it because she wants to sell it to make that affiliate income. And for this one specifically, I feel so good about it. I like it so much that I do feel comfortable fully recommending it to you as a product. And because I do feel so comfortable with that, I am going to be including my affiliate link in the description so that when you go to purchase this, not only do I get a little bit of support from that, but also you get a discount. So, it's a win-win situation here. But yeah, that being said, I think this thing is great. I think if you do have the money to spend on it, this is going to be the indoor composter that you're going to want to put your money into, because again, it does take all of those food scraps that you cannot put in other indoor composters, and you honestly can't even usually put in outside, like regular cold composting. A lot of people can start a compost pile, and if you don't keep up with it and stir it and make sure you balance your browns and your greens, then you're not going to get that thermophilic composting phase, and things like meat and cheese, they're not going to break down in that compost pile unless you are keeping really close eye on it, taking really good care of it. And this kind of removes all of that work from the equation. I really, really like that part of it. And I think as a recommendation for people who are trying to reduce their food waste and don't necessarily have the time to go deal with a giant pile outside that has to be turned every couple of days, this is a really excellent solution. All right, so before I go, just a reminder that if you are curious about the quality of your soil and you do want to have it professionally tested, definitely check out Matt Wakeman. His link is in the description below. He's going to do a really good job telling you whether or not you have enough organic matter in your soil, so that will tell you whether or not you're adding enough compost. He's also going to be able to tell you what types of microbes live in your soil and whether or not they're beneficial or detrimental. And he's going to be able to give you a really well-rounded picture of things that you can do to improve your soil health and therefore vastly improve your plant's health. And if you are going to be looking into purchasing a Reencle, again, that link is in the description below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, I wish you all happy gardening.